Hey, I'm just checking in, sharing some more thoughts on the times, these fascinatingly strange times that we're living. Um, so, with the whole virus thing, like I said previously, the world has split into two different realities. One where the media is believed and this virus is incredibly dangerous to our health, and we need to take all these drastic measures and give up all sorts of freedoms to protect ourselves and protect our communities. And then you got the other side where, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but where logic is used and information is actually looked at, and we take real studies that have actually been independently reviewed and use those instead of just the political. Yeah, I mean, just for the specific example of masks, which those have been for some reason very much pushed back into the forefront of all these mandates that you got to wear a mask everywhere you go, and people blaming people for putting other people at risk. So for anyone who believes that, I've looked, and I would love to see any actual studies that show, like, real independently peer-reviewed studies that show the efficacy of wearing masks in combating viral spread, because they've tried to prove that they work. I've seen several studies where they try and prove it, and they all come up inconclusive at best. And at worst, like, we know that wearing masks lower our oxygen intake, which oxygen is useful for everything in our bodies, from our immune system to our brain to our other bodily functions. Like, we need oxygen. So if you're going to restrict it, you're going to have adverse effects. I mean, that's a given. But there's no study that shows efficacy of them, especially not these cloth. I see people wearing bandanas and shirts, and it's like, what is that going to do? I mean, do you really believe that's saving you or anyone else? But that's just an example of these two different worlds that people are living in, and it comes to that point where we get to choose. We get to choose how we frame our reality. And personally, I'm choosing the one that's supported with information and facts, and not just hearsay and dogma. This, like, pushed belief that doesn't have any sort of reality tied to it. And it's all about control, right? Like, what easier way to get people to believe that this is all real than to have these physical symbols that everyone's wearing to show complacency and compliance, to show that it doesn't matter if we actually put out real information. As long as we tell people what to do, they'll do it. And that this is where it gets kind of hard for people to follow at times, because it's like, why would they do something like that? Why would they just put out this misinformation to get people to wear masks for no reason? And if you're not really willing to engage with that subject, it won't make sense. But what's becoming clearer, and what's becoming more relevant, and what will become very clear soon enough, is that this wasn't about health. This was about control. And it has to do with all of those things that people brush off as conspiracy theories. All of these topics where powerful people get together and they want to do things to further put themselves in a controlling position over all of humanity. And people don't want to believe that. People don't want to acknowledge that that's reality, that there's some, like, globally conspiring group of very powerful people. And I'm not saying it's like one singular group, because it's probably multiple groups that all have the same ideology, but it's all about control. And, like, what better way to do it than push fear, push misinformation, get people to do what we say so that we can continue to subject them to whatever ends. But that's hard for people to acknowledge because they don't want to believe that something like that could have been pulled off. People think that that's not possible. Like, you couldn't pull something like that off. But the proof's out there. The information is there. It's just whether or not you're willing to engage with it. That's the tricky thing about truth. Anyways, it doesn't require your belief to exist. It just is. And so that's why it's like, some of these videos I've conveyed how it's somewhat exciting in the sense that this is a really sloppy attempt that of control, in the sense that there's so many gaps within the story that can be exposed and put forward, which means that they're losing control. Like, if they're willing to go to these extents in this sort of sloppy of a way, they're losing that control over people. People are starting to understand it and realize it, which means that information is going to continue coming out. So, I mean, again, you don't have to believe me. You can continue thinking that I'm just spouting some crazy stuff, or maybe I'm going crazy, and that's okay. You get to believe that, but it will come out, and then you'll know. And I promise I'm not going to be one to rub it in your face, because I get like how difficult it is to entertain and believe, because it's huge. It's everything. It's like acknowledging that most everything that we're told is based on a lie. But the more you look into it, the more that becomes pretty painfully obvious after a certain point. We live in an upside down world. But to me, I see it as a potential for acknowledging that and creating that world that's in alignment with truth, where we aren't subject to these sort of behind the scenes secrets. And I don't know, I'm definitely a dreamer, and I'll always be a dreamer, but I got big dreams, and it all like points to working through these shadows, working through this darkness, working through this uncomfortable truth that we don't want to acknowledge. And all of these scenarios are giving us a perfect opportunity to see them physically. It's not hearsay, but it's still a choice whether or not you engage with them and believe them. I don't know. I'm going in circles at this point, but just wanted to kind of get that out there and continue to urge people to pay attention, continue, like, ask questions, research. There's so much information out there, and yeah, there's a lot of it that's made up, of course. Like, a lot of the internet has made up lies too. But that's for you to figure out, like, what's truth and what's not. That's for all of us to figure out, use our discernment, and actually step into our use your brain. Like, use your brain to figure out what's true and what's not, because then no one can lie to you anymore. I don't know. Again, I've said it before, but if you're curious and want someone to talk to, like, I'm here. I like talking about this kind of stuff. And I acknowledge that a lot of people don't, but I do. So yeah, we're getting to that place. We're getting to that world. We're gonna get there. Are you ready?